Hey dudes and dudettes, for today's Nostalgia Fix, we're going to be talking about my favorite retro Star Wars game, which is Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. Now before some of you cry foul and say, no way, it's gotta be Knights of the Old Republic, let me tell you, I think that seems like a great game. I tried getting into it back in the day, but I just wasn't into role-playing games at the time, probably because I was young and gravitated towards a lot more action. I do love RPGs now, but anyways, the point is, if you love KOTOR more than any of the other retro Star Wars games, that's fine, I won't say you're wrong. There are other stellar titles like TIE Fighter, Rogue Squadron, the arcade games, and so on, but for me it was Dark Forces 2 all the way. But before we get too far ahead, let me tell you what inspired this video in the first place, and it will make a lot more sense why I love Dark Forces 2 so much. Earlier this year, I got into Jedi Survivor, which did have some technical issues, but that aside, I can easily say that is now my favorite Star Wars game, retro or modern. It's just a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. The level of detail alone is staggering. Then I figured I should play the game before it, Fallen Order, which is also a stellar game. I go back and forth as to which game has the better story or music. I definitely think Jedi Survivor has improved gameplay, but at any rate, they are both so good and to me have everything a Star Wars fan could love. Namely, a great story, great Star Wars music, great gameplay including lightsaber battles, and the icing on the cake, the ability to pilot Star Wars vehicles. Now Jedi Knight doesn't allow you to use vehicles that I recall, but it does have heavy helpings of the other qualifications I mentioned. Let's start with the story. This isn't as good as the storytelling in KOTOR, but it's still solid enough. It's a classic revenge plot, where a villain named Jarek is trying to rebuild the Empire and kills the main character's father to obtain the location for the Valley of the Jedi. The main character you play as is Kyle Katarn, and you spend the game hunting down Jarek, the map of the valley, and fighting off Jarek's other Dark Jedi accomplices. As you progress, you're treated to the original John Williams score along the way. This is the game and soundtrack that turned me into an OG Star Wars fan, and I grew up with the original 3 films, but I kind of forgot about them as a teenager. Fortunately, this game's soundtrack reminded me of how nostalgic and fun this universe was. But lest I get any copyright strikes, let's move on to the gameplay. There is a lot of lightsaber battles to enjoy, and fortunately for the time, the lightsabers felt impactful enough. Now it's nothing like the 2 games featuring Cal Kestis, which as a side note, my wife played through both of these games and she loved them so much, she got me this action figure for a Father's Day gift. But anyways, back to Jedi Knight. Most of the time, you'll be using blasters and the first-person shooter mechanics are great in this game. You move very quickly and the controls feel tight and responsive, which is perfect for a game like this. Many people like Dark Forces better, but to me the controls and feel still feel too much like the game Doom, with a Star Wars skin. It's still a great game to be sure, but Jedi Knight just is leaps and bounds better with the graphics and controls, in my opinion. As you progress through the game, you earn force powers that have 3 different categories, light, neutral, and dark. Depending on how you allocate your powers, you will either get a light or dark side ending. There's also a part in the plot development where you have to make a critical choice, which also impacts the ending. So it's nice to know there's some replayability to the plot, and I played through both endings. The light side was much more satisfying as far as I'm concerned. Another thing I liked about the sequel over the first game is the level variety and verticality. The levels just feel a lot more dynamic and lived in than the standard Death Star look of the first game, and for some reason this game gives a heavy dose of vertigo. I don't know how, as there are other games with steep drops. Maybe it's the camera angle or how Kyle controls, but I actually enjoyed the butterflies in my stomach while traversing through some of these levels, and it helped with the immersion a lot. If you don't like vertigo, then you may want to pass on this game. I also remember being impressed with the game's puzzles. You can't always just blast your way through the game. You have to problem solve to gain access to new areas. So yeah, it's just overall the best retro Star Wars game I can think of, but you may have a different opinion, so let me know in the comments what your favorite is. Also be sure to check out my favorite Star Wars film in the link above, and with that, we hope you have a totally radical day, and we'll see you in the next video.
That was some seriously good nostalgia. But remember friends, it's also important to make new memories with your loved ones.
Do, 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 do.